Yeah.
Seriously, I hope I'm kidding. So I've been playing a lot with animation in a couple of projects, and I thought it would be nice to try and teach you what I've learned, really. Hope for the best. So, CSS. And just before we start, a little aside, does anyone know, if you've been using Flash, you've seen them tweening around a lot. Does anyone know where that came from?
In between.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the old days, senior animators would draw the keyframes and then hand it off to their juniors to do what they called in-betweening, which became tweening. There you go, you've learned something already. What a great start. Alright, okay. So, browsers have given us a lot of nice new tools to move us around, whereas before it was just JavaScript. CSS is one of the easiest ways to go about it, and particularly transitions, because they work a lot more like how CSS works at the moment. Sorry about that. So here's your typical CSS. You've got your property and you've got your short form, and then you break it out into your long form. In the same way with transitions, you've got your short form. You kind of what property. Here's your long form. So you've got your property, your duration, timing function, which one you use. Those you want to use, and the delay if you want to set it. And also, because we've got all this lot of new CSS3 stuff, you can mix and add two transitions to any one particular element. Or if you want to go super crazy, you can animate any single property on an element that you want all at the same time. Which can be quite handy if you don't want to remember all the transforms and you have to remember which way around things go. If you try and use it on like a block, really what you're doing, you should really only be using it on elements where you've got absolute values, so it goes from number to the other number. If you try and use it on something like display block and you try and say hover, it's going to go flash, you're crazy, so don't do that. So typically you need to, Phil Murray right there. The only way you can trigger CSS only transitions is by using anything like hover. Well, typically you use hover, but you're kind of stuck to whatever event CSS has. But you can kind of hack it. In this one, you can use active. Where's not the mouse? So actually, you can kind of and you can sort of set states, because otherwise, as soon as you release like hover, it's going to go back using the same transition to its original place. But you can kind of hack a little bit using things like active or there's Philmary again. You can use so that's a styles checkbox. So as long as the element you want to transition is next to a checkbox, you can any point you can change the button based on the check value as well. I'm not bothered to use that. So that's kind of like where your limits are when it comes to transitions. It's meant to really just be for adding little subtle effects, rollovers, passage changes, moving Philmary around, little things like that. All right, so let me see my own slides there.
Big screen.
No, I can't see the mouse or anything. Right, because I couldn't get stuff down quick enough, I'm going to have to break out of this and then show you that isn't what I had in mind. Alright, so another nice little feature. Let's see if I've got it around somewhere. You have to bear with me, I'm still not very good at this whole presenting stuff. So if I've got Alright, so here's a typical little hover effect. So before you had your timing functions, what things like Chrome now allow you to do, I don't know if you've ever noticed this one yet. You can now see what the using is on there. I don't know if anyone's done that. So you can kind of, so they're your built-in ones, like you've got ease out, ease in, I don't know what the other ones are offhand, but you can kind of click in and then you can actually start checking out different types. Click around a bit, or
What is that? Is that the sort of development tool in Chrome?
Yes, it is. Firefox has a similar one. I doubt Safari has.
And how do you get that up?
If you go to Inspect.
Okay.
So that's a nice way, and then it'll tell you you've got this cubic Bezier function which allows you can break out of its normal ones, and then you've got some values in Beziers, and then in fact you can kind of, once you hover over it, actually you puts the effect that you've set on it, so you can kind of have a play in there and then get the fine tuning you want, and then copy and paste it back into your code. Oh yeah, you can also step. I actually didn't know about this one. I knew about it in animation, but I didn't know about it you can do it in transitions as well. So if you add steps and then sort of any number, it will break it up into sort of individual chunks, which is very good for spriting, if anyone wants to do any of that. So if you've got an image with all your little sequences in it, you can use background position and then have it step through your position. So yeah, that's quite nice. I didn't know that until quite recently.
What's the start?
It is, sorry, this doesn't show very well. For example, if you've set a margin, okay, we're using margin here, you set a margin left of 10, and then you set your transition for margin, 1 second, and then once you tell it to have margin whatever's next, it's going to break whatever that is. So if it starts at 10, ends at 100, it's going to break your 90 down into however many steps that you told it. There's something about this start and end, I forget quite what it is, something about which way around it, if it's off the number, if it doesn't divide well, it'll sort of end here instead of there, or vice versa. I've not had a proper play with that one, I just found out the other day. So yeah, you'll learn something new. So that's kind of the extent of where you would use transitions. And then so CSS animations comes in to fill in the slack. I'm trying to, so it uses a different syntax. You've got your keyframes, so it's a little bit like media queries, I guess. So you can create a little @ block, you give it a name, and then you can set keyframes inside it. The basic one is where you just give it a start and its end, so that is going to do exactly the same as what transition does. With the nice added bonus that you can set the start value in the keyframes, whereas with transition you might want to set opacity to 0, which means it will be not shown, and then if you load the page up and then the browser doesn't support transitions, you're going to be stuck with an invisible object. Whereas with keyframes, you can set the opacity to 0 on the first frame. It means as soon as the page loads, only supporting browsers will actually do it anyway. So that's a nice added bonus to animation. So I guess you'd probably want to use animations more than transitions if you're going to do things like that.
So, sorry, that you had from and to block there.
Yes.
Is it meant? Is that a typo, or is that intentional that 2 has no colon?
It's typo. You're not meant to have any colon. It still works though. Which is why I can catch it.
So neither from nor to you need?
No.
Okay.
And then once you've created your keyframes, you give it a name, you then apply it. So this is the short form, this is the long form. Yes, there's quite a few things you can play around with, which is quite fun. Most of them make sense, I think, from the name, except the last one. But that's actually one of the more important ones. The fill mode, if you create an animation, once it's run it, it's going to return itself back to the original state by default. The fill mode is what stops that. So if you set it to forwards, it means once it gets to the end, it stays at the end. I think that's, which isn't like that by default. It kind of should be, in my opinion. There's also reverse if you want to run backwards. Things like that, and you've got play state running can also be paused, so that can be a good way of you can putting stuff in hover and then pausing an animation, things like that.
What's the correct redirection?
Yeah, how does that relate to film mode?
I forgot already now.
MDN.
Nope, completely forgot. Yeah, we have to MDN now. I think it's
It's where you start.
sorry.
Either at 100% or at 0%. It could also, like direction is also, it goes back and forth. It could also be forward and reverse, I believe.
Yeah.
And also reverse alternate or something. Which is where it goes from the 100% to 0 back to 100%.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, but that all depends from what the 0% is. So whatever the property is that you specify in the 0%, it will then obey what goes into the 100%, and it will follow this rotation. So
Is that a question or sorry, I missed the beginning?
no. I'm just saying that if you specify the 0 point at 0%,
Yeah.
and then whatever is in the 100% is going to respect whatever is in the 100% and the 0%, and always the 0% is going to be the starting point. So no matter what the reverse is or the forward is, if you specify the forward, it will go to up to 100%, will stop there. And if it goes up, if you specify that you want the reverse, it's going to go back to 0, only then.
Doesn't that, what you're talking about, I think it's the fill mode.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, but this was the direction, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They sort of influence one another.
Right, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry.
We can have a little hack at the end.
Yeah. Maybe. And then so similarly, what we got? So you can break it up into percentages as well. This is obviously the power of the keyframes. So you can shift. Well, you can change properties between a certain set of the time, and then you can stop it, and then you can sort of play it again. You can play around with that, and you can use the comma notation because at some points you might want to actually wait at a value for a little while, and so that's just a shorter way. I mean, you can just have 30% later, but if you're going to assign them both the same thing anyway, then that's just a slightly shorter way of doing that. You can assign multiple animations. Obviously, why would you add any of that? Yeah, well, there you go. That's a nice example. You can use that. There, this is your takeaway. There's a little. All right.
I think maybe just like a really basic example of where it's useful, just like.
I can show you a great one. You remember that? Let's see where I actually put it. So that flash it back, baby.
You got the sublime text and atom over.
Yes, yes, I do. There you go. So this is all the transforms that we used to make all the text move in. Well, okay, it was the same thing for each word because it all did the same thing. Yeah, beautiful, isn't it? So Matrix 3D, I don't really want to cover this because it's insane maths and it's beyond the scope of what I'm capable of even explaining. But it does, if you're going to play around transforms, these are pretty good if you want to try and collect them together, really. So try to have you rotate scales and all that stuff and trying to figure out which order they need to be in. Matrices have kind of got you covered, but they're really a pain in the butt to figure out and use. Having said that, the reason I have it like that as it is because it's a great little tool, Bounce.js. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. So if you get rid of what's there, starts with a little box. You can choose from things to do. So yeah, that's where I got from, and you can just explore the success. And it is always tons of matrices. So that's a great way to get started with your animations.
Is that because the matrices are faster?
Not necessarily. Provided you're using transforms and 3D transforms, they're all kind of the same speed. Matrices are just a more compact way of explaining. It's just because once you're dealing with 3D, if you do a lot of 3D work, you're going to be using matrices. Like especially if you're off making games and those sorts of things, they're like the result of what the browser's doing behind the scenes anyway, with all your different rotation scales. But if you know what you're doing, you can kind of combine them first.
It's easier to generate.
Yeah. So is the 3D matrix running off GPU in
Yes.
that case?
Anytime you see the 3D in there, it's the CPU, GPU, sorry.
So assume there's a 2D matrix, is that just running off processing?
It used to be. I think more and more browsers are shifting them over. I don't know which ones have shifted what yet, but they're trying to move as much as humanly possible in terms of animation onto the GPU. It's obviously going to be faster. I just don't know what level they're all up to yet.
Translating it off your own, you
Yeah, yeah. Although translate, even 2D translate, still not entirely sure. I mean, if it's on a different compositor thread, which is why it's sped up anyway, but not entirely sure if it's GPU or not. It's smoother because it's not having to affect anything else on the page. But yeah, so you try and use 3Ds when you can, but the support's slightly less than 2D ones. Although I think it's probably changed enough right now not to matter too much.
So why should I be using 3D where I can?
Because it's GPU accelerated. Graphics card is going to pick up the slack instead of the CPU. It's going to be able to do it faster.
You look unconvinced, James.
It sounds very implementation specific. And,
It's what they did in the early days, which is what led to a certain hack, which was if you wanted something to move quickly, you just put a translate transform 3D on it, just so that it just suddenly promoted it to a GPU layer.
that was the Chrome hack for a little while.
Yeah, because the normal translates weren't accelerated and you wanted them to be, so you hacked it. So, I mean, yeah, I'm guessing in time the idea is to get everything like that promoted, but I don't know what state they're at with it.
So it's like pseudo will change.
Sorry?
Hasn't that been replaced by will change?
Not replaced. The will change is not meant to replace anything. It is, in fact, they've even said it's a hack already. Like as soon as it came out, it was
Sorry, isn't like will change the correct way of doing it?
No.
It's not.
No, even the people who brought it out say this is a last resort. It's a when you've made your site and you've made it move around and it's still a bit slow, maybe sprinkle a couple of those on there. It's just dangerous because you're going to be trying to do animation on a nice, powerful laptop, and every time you use a will change, it's going to create a new compositor layer, which it takes up more memory and more CPU, GPU, and so on small devices. They suddenly start to crumble. So they really are meant for if you need to transform widths and heights and those are things which are definitely not going to be accelerated because they're going to move stuff on the page around, then you're going to use will change because then the browser knows it can make optimizations. So yeah, don't go slapping on every single element that's moving. Spare. So that's kind of the power of animations right there. So this is a nice tool if you want to kind of get going on a few animations in.
Bounce.js, is that something you include in your site to do that?
No,
Is that just to generate?
Yeah, it's just a generator.
Okay.
So you just take that CSS, put it in, just like I did
Yeah.
what you saw, that's
Okay.
just right in there. So yeah, it's quite nice. Alright, so the power of animations comes from when you can use a little bit of JavaScript because even animations still suffer from relying on the CSS events, which are not free. So you're really going to get a lot of stuff when you start adding just little things like this. So once you set a transition, start with transitions, once you set a transition on an element, there you go, just a little bit of JavaScript just to change that left value and then suddenly that's going to transition. Straightforward. Or even better is if you group up all your changes into a class. Same again, things like performance. If the browser can apply a lot of things at once, it's going to do it a lot more efficiently than if you try and do them separately. And then of course you've got all your event functions. So opens you up to a whole new world of moving things around.
Sorry, Graham, could you jack up the text size by about 50%?
I don't know if that's going to stay or it's always going to break everything else. Yep, broke everything else. Sorry, I'm going to have to shut down a little bit. Okay, so a couple of weird things when it comes to setting things with JavaScript. So if you stick to just changing a property using as we saw see before, or adding a class, you're fine. The problem comes if you want to use JavaScript like fully to set your transitions. So you want to actually add the transition onto an element, and then you want to change the property all in one fell swoop. So basically you are removing yourself from the CSS. You no longer want to actually use a CSS. So you set your transition on it, and what would usually happen is your browser will try and batch both of them together as if you just put them next to each other in CSS. So suddenly you'll just have the thing after transition. You won't quite know why. The actual reason is you need to cause a style recalculation between the two. So the browser needs a second to notice the change that you've set the transition on it, and then set the next property. So you can do it 2 ways. One, you can do it like a set timeout, and even with a 0, I was setting like 10 milliseconds before. It was just anything that just causes a little hitch. Obviously slightly better, and it requests an animation frame, so obviously you've still got that little one thing. Or you can force the style recalculation. That's going to be a bit of a performance problem, just so you're aware. Yeah, because you're forcing the recalculation on the bottom one. There's a library called Zepto.js, I don't know if any of you know that one, for its animation. jQuery's animation is bad, we may all know this. Anyone? it uses set timeout. So we've long known it's been fine in the short term, not a long-term solution. Things like Zepto came along to try and enhance that. There's also one called Velocity. But Zepto uses purely this method right here. So it does, you do get better performance, but it's going to kind of crumble a little bit. With that, we're going to show you a little demo. Let's see. So, if anyone knows Green Sock, yeah. So he did a little speed test. So that's the jQuery. So what we're going to do, it's going to spit out a load of dots. So we're going to start with 500 because actually it does start to cripple. That's actually alright, let's move that to 1,000. So Starfield, jQuery. Oh dear, it's already starting to crumble. So if we shift up to Zepto, which is the CSS style. It's better, but you can, there's a weird thing with using CSS, it puts stuff into waves. There's a weird bug when you try and use those sorts of things. And then when you use sort of pure CSS, JavaScript, sorry, suddenly it's, yeah. So,
is that using Wrath then?
yes.
Isn't Zepto?
No, that last one, the middle one was Zepto. So that was because it uses pure, setting the CSS styles directly on each element. So it has to force the recalculation every time, and then everything kind of slows down a bit. But it's fine because no one's really going to try and create in pure CSS. Well, I'd hope. Okay, yeah, and also you can get events. There are other events, sorry, I didn't quite have time to find a full list. But once you create, even if it's just in CSS, you can then apply this onto the element that's got the transition, and then you can actually sort of see when it's ended, and then change them together now, which you couldn't do before. So much code. Okay, so we know there are a few little problems when it comes to just using. So there are little. I'll just go over a couple of them. Right, so like CSS and CSS animation transitions kind of fall over when you want to try and do like multi-state things. They are not. They can't pause without using things like JavaScript. you can't stack animations either. So if you move an item 10 pixels, there's no way to suddenly then move it another 10 unless you like have another class that moves it the next 10 and things like that. So obviously we're hitting the problem with CSS. So we're going to have to move to JavaScript to try to fix those little problems. And also with some of the performance things, there are just times when you need to go the JavaScript route. So anywhere where you've got a bit of logic, even if it's games or sort of events or things that require knowing its own state, you just go JavaScript. So we can look at how we would go about doing that, really. Right, a tween. So this I've been playing around with my own little library. I'll try and explain all the stuff. I'll go with that. Right. So this is JavaScript that will get you doing the simplest way of doing a transition. Ultimately, is a tween. So you've created your object. So you set your property. Like I said, it's the simplest way. You've got a function which is the loop. In the loop, you make it go 1 pixel on the left, set it, and then run that loop again. And that is an animation at its most simple. Right. I was trying to think of a simpler way, but I couldn't find it. And then you can sort of create a tween and then run it. And that's all. Let's see if I've got to. Yeah! Look at go! Yeah, so that was a bit simple. But I did feel like it needed showing just because it's kind of silly how sort of simple animation really is, because all you need now. Where's it gone? So everything is here. Everything you need to do to get an animation is the calculations area. It's what you do with those values that defines how you can create a proper sort of tween. So I'm going to sit down for this because I'm going to
Do you mind just explaining that last line, the request animation?
Yeah, sure. So historically, browsers have given you set timeout, set interval as the only ways of doing things in any particular loop. These are not built for that purpose, but we use them anyway because there's nothing better. Along came a request animation frame, which allows you to tie into the browser's refresh rate. It's kind of like VSync, do you know that in computer games? So every screen is updating at roughly, well, most screens are updating at 60 frames a second, and you can, a lot of the computer games in particular really try and do this, is to try and get all their drawing stuff ready so that it sets the screen at the same time as the screen is updating, so you get nice smooth animations. And that's what request animation frame is doing. So by calling this, you're requesting that on the next cycle the browser is doing, it's going to run your code. So it keeps everything like in sync. And it really does work a lot like VSync, which means certain mobile browsers or just mobile devices actually render at, say, 50 frames a second because they just want to conserve battery life. And similarly, and I was asking this, and we haven't got a definitive answer, but there are monitors now which run at about 144 frames a second, or hertz rather, and there's a good chance that that will also run at 144 frames a second. So it might not be wise to purely rely on this for your updating, because suddenly you can get have stuff running really quickly, like off the screen about a heartbeat before you realise it. It's alright, because I can also teach you how to slow down the loop, which is not as easy as set timeout, I'm not going to lie. That does allow you to just update at a particular point, but it's not very efficient, so you do have to put a ton more code to slow down.
Is that using Delta or something?
Yeah. So that's your nice symbol tween. No, I'm not going to manage this anymore because this Reveal.js is a bit of a hack, I have to admit. Trying to stretch and suddenly you can't scroll anymore. Okay. So the steps function of the transitions, if you ever want to use it in JavaScript, this is a nice little way. I'll show you. Okay. So So we take the same kind of idea. So instead of tweet, it's more spriter. I've had to set a width because we're going to be changing the background. So the idea now is we've got a little box and we've got an image which has many different frames. So we're going to try and shift it along, and that's using the sprite idea. So one way to do this is to just set an array of the animation it's going to go through. In particular, the one I'm using, maybe a really small version of it somewhere. There it is. Yeah. I've been playing on my computer game stuff, so let's see if I can. Yeah. So this is a little sprite. This is the sprite from Zelda from the SNES. That's like literally whipped out of the ROM cartridge. It's great. So you can see this little walk animation. We're going to use the one here. So that's his like standing still one, which is kind of like 0, 1, 2, the third column in. So his animation is kind of like 3, 4, 5, 6, and then back to 5, 4, 3. So it kind of goes in like a pendulum swing. Now you can try and do that with code and go, when it's got to the end, now set a direction to go back, and then once it's got to that one, set a direction back to that way. But that's far easier. Just set an array of the values, and then once you get to the end of the array, go back to the start of the array. So then once you're in the update loop, you just got a little sort of count. That's actually just me halving the speed, because it's a bit quicker, 60 frames a second. So yeah, so once it's reached the end, go back to the beginning, that's that bit. And then so your column, as we said, like 1, 2, and 3, it's just that bit of the array. And then so we're setting the background position of just minus however much, so whatever the width of each of the sprites is.
So
And then
can you just show that if condition now? Oh, okay.
yeah, it's just me halving the frame rate.
No, it's the calculations if. So that's,
Back to the start of the array.
that's just a mod.
And then here we go.
Ah, hey.
There he goes!
That is pretty quick still.
Yeah.
So that's a nice way to get spriting going on your website if you want it.
It's training for Brighton Marathon.
Yes. Actually, I've got, because we're talking about animation and stuff, let's see if I've still got that one. Can't read it. No, it's not anything.
Now we know you like Subway.
Oh man, I've been going to Cambridge, it's been eating it every day, 'cause it's right across the road.
Yeah.
It's good, it's like £3 for a nice sandwich. Yeah. I've got no regrets. Alright. This is actually where I was, so that's using the same, so that's why that's the same code, effectively. So obviously on and left and right. Just doing that. So that's how spriting can be used. Mostly for games, I guess, but you might find a reason to use it in your site somewhere.
Sorry, just quickly, Graham. I mean, that looked super smooth and sharp and everything. How would that look on a, sort of an older phone or something like that? You know,
That Zelda.
Yeah, like
How old are we talking?
Say a 4 or 5 year old phone.
It moved pretty quickly because there's nothing going on, like in terms of.
So I guess sort of I'm just curious as to like how much performance you need for this sort of thing.
That not much. When you start ramping it up, it's going to need a bit more, but it should be okay. It's not that taxing. It is pure canvas, so it's not accelerated. I've not tested it on small phones, not meant for that yet. I'll go around to that one day, I'm sure.
Just I've got a 4-year-old phone.
Alright, so yeah, so once we've got something running at 60, the code I used there was like cutting it down by half, but there is a slightly better way of doing that. Let's see where I put it. It's really hard to see stuff. Oh, by the way, if you've got like pixel art things, these help you have it not be anti-aliased. Very useful. Chromes came a lot later than the others, but it's in there now. Not that one. Sorry, I can't see the screen very well. Alright, so once you've got a basic tween, and we want to go a little bit further, it's not very performant and it's not very useful because you can only use it on like one thing all breaks down. So what I've been working on, where have I got it? Oh, why is it so far away? Yeah, no. Yeah, that's right. There's a lot more going on there. Alright, so I guess I'll start at the beginning. It's stuff I wanted to play around with, but there was a particular site called Notice. We had some interns in the office about half a year ago now, and they wanted a funky site with all the lovely parallax scrolling, you know, all that jazz, and I thought this is a great way for me to actually just write this stuff from scratch and just have a bit of play around. So this was the reason. So all these sort of, that's the tween as well. You can see quite how smooth it is. Got videos and stuff there. Stuff moving from the right. So this is kind of like what started where you've got, you know, backgrounds and things fading in and out. But as you can see, you can kind of really speed through it, although there are a couple of bugs, not gonna lie. So even with video, it is not really, you know, batting an eyelid. That's a fair bit of work to get it to the state. And we'll try and cover what that was. So here's the expanded tween. Here's its anatomy here. But the reason I'm using anatomy is because it's got that easy way of like putting all your code at the top. Whereas this one, I couldn't quite get around to it. It's just a little checkbox.
Which is loads of new lines at the end.
I could, you're right, for every single file, yes.
Thanks.
So this is kind of like the culmination of some of my work. So what the tween now does is takes the element that you're going to be moving around. Okay, so from and to, they're both objects which take the property you want to change and value starting from to, so the same property and then the ending one. Then duration, how long you want it to be, and then there's a couple of options like starting and paused, setting a delay, and then some easing types.
So what does ELM mean? Elm?
That's element.
Oh, element. Okay.
I do have a couple of other fancy things going on here. I'm not sure I like quite what I've done with it. It kind of stores the element globally, so that if you run another tween on the same element, it keeps previous options. It also takes whatever you've set on the element. So if you've already specified like a position fixed or something like that, it'll take that and remove it so it doesn't overwrite all your things. Because in terms of like performance, it is a lot quicker. Well, it's a lot better for the browser if you bundle all your styles up and then actually set the style attribute all in one go, rather than doing like dot style this several times. See if I've got it down. Yeah. So it's very limited. It only really deals with like translates and transforms and passages and whatever thing that has like a pixel value, I think. So that's how you want to set everything like really quickly. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of style calculations. So that's how you sort of start playing it. Play. You have to know if it's is animating or not. That's for another thing. We'll get to that in a second. And then here is kind of the yeah. So what's happening is, so it's taking a time. the loop is elsewhere, and it's running this, and we'll see that in a second. It takes the time in from the last frame. Let's see. Oh yeah, some of my comments there. So some of the easing functions, originally I assumed that once they'd reached the end, they would like just give me the same output every time, but no, they keep going. So you have to go, like, has it reached the end of its easing thing, and then if so, like, keep that at last value. Yes, that's it. So yeah, and then delaying, waits until the delay's gone. And this is where, so it goes through the keys, so if you've got like opacity and transform at the same time, it's going to pass each of them into my whatever using function I've set to get the value on each individual update. And it's also a good idea to change your render and split up your render and update functions, because sometimes you actually want to update things and actually not show the change straight away. Not too often, mind you, but it's still a good practice to break them up. It also means you can, if you change to canvas instead, you could alter what the rendering thing was. So that could be HTML, it could be canvas, it could be WebGL, but the update just changes your values, so it's good to kind of divorce those two. So once we've kind of got tween.
Sorry, where's the element render? Oh, that's that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've moved that into this one sort of element object that I create that stores each. So if you had, if you accessed the navigation and wanted to move that down, it would store it in the central object. So that if I then did another thing on it, and I can say move it right, it will keep the down first and then I'll move it right. So the big boss of what all of it is, where are you? The core, right. So I've bundled in some of the easing functions as well. I think I've got these off of, there's a huge jQuery easings module, so I've grabbed a few out of that and just altered them around a bit. They're really nice, and all you have to do is put in sort of those values and you'll just get your position back out of it again. Right, so this is kind of like what controls the animation for sort of the entire site for that notice site. So a lot more than you kind of need if you're going to do animation. But the key is I've taken the game approach. So it's the one loop. There's only one loop in the entire site. As soon as you start your site, this animation frame kicks in and starts going. But I guess the key is that it only runs what it needs to run at any given time. There's a lot of stuff, it's globals that you want to keep track of while it's looping. Event distance for scroll, resize, and load, and then run the loop. So what we're doing here is we're debouncing the scroll, if anyone's heard that term. So you don't want to run things directly on the scroll, because you actually don't know how often that thing's firing. Instead, on scroll, all you want to do is take the value of how far you've scrolled and then store it. And then when your loop comes back around again to process, it just takes whatever the last value is, which means you're still sticking to that 60 frames a second and only acting on what you need to. Because I think sometimes a scroll event can fire sort of thousands of times, so it can really slow stuff down. On the same thing, I've also kind of debounced the resize, because you don't want to actually run that each time you're sizing. Some browsers, same thing, as you're dragging the browser smaller, it's firing this event and then running whatever you're trying to resize, but normally you actually want to wait for even 20 milliseconds before you actually do something. You're going to wait for the resizing to stop, and then...
Yeah, sorry, where's it saying is resizing and it's scrolling to false?
Oh, at the bottom
Oh,
of the loop.
carry on.
And here's your loop. So what you've got, each time it's looping, I'm using high performance timing functions as well, why not? So like how much time has elapsed, so you've got how far you scrolled. I've been detecting velocity, so you can actually do things based on how fast someone scrolled, or skip things entirely, so you can cut down again on certain things. And then, just like you kind of would in a game, you actually just check for whatever you're trying to check. So I've got like timelines in there, I'll show in a second. But I've got your tweens. So it actually just looks to see if there are any animations in the queue that it needs to deal with. So
You're a game developer on school.
I attempted. I've tried. Like, yeah, that little Zelda thing, so that's far as I've got. It's a little more further on. That was I was in the wrong branch. There's a little bit more. There's like little loading bits here and there, but yeah, that's what far as I've got in terms of writing my own game. It's taken me all 2 years, I think. I haven't said that.
Just out of curiosity, you're using, you're just using a for loop, like with an index.
Yeah.
Is there any reason that you're doing that rather than for each?
Yeah, like I'm cutting down on an extra function call.
Yeah.
Everything in here is as micro-optimized as you could possibly find. Stupidly so. I would not recommend anyone doing this, by the way, because look, I've even got, this is even better, a faster splice than JavaScript's own splice function to pull out, you know, the finished animation from the queue. Yeah, so I use that a couple of times. That's also the same reason for the one loop, because you're not like firing multiple. Apparently, it is bad to have multiple request animation frames like going at the same time. I don't know why exactly. Something about it stacking, but then if you've got 2 loops and then the same stuff in it to repeat the same anyway, if it's in one loop. Anyway.
Yeah, just asking those questions has prevented me ever getting a job.
So cutting down on the coordination between two functions being called
Is it?
in the same frame.
I will take your word now. Yeah, so, and then, yeah, I've got things like idling, so I can detect, I can do stuff when, you know, if it's sitting around for a while, I can maybe load in some other things. I did start playing around with, like, idling and loading in images and stuff, like, in frames to try and just smooth out loading processes of bits and pieces. Triggers, this was the big one, this is the one that melted my brain for a while. This is the bit that says when you're in an area, you know, transition stuff, and then when you're out of the area, like transition next and do all those things. And yeah, so even though it's mostly just what do you call it? Collision detection. Because really you're just looking at this one, like, you know, your window box, and then checking to see if the top and bottom are above and below things at all time. But I don't know why it just took me forever to try and work all this kind of stuff out. Because you've got things like wanting to check to see if you reach the middle of the screen, and then or if it's at the bottom and starting at a trigger. So yeah, all that kind of stuff. You see it'll rebounce. And resize the bouncing as well. Oh, that's an added extra I did. So at the moment you can have your trigger, and when you create, your tween, when you create it, inside the tween it actually adds itself to this queue. Okay. So it puts itself into like this cause animation queue. What I've noticed, there's another library called Motion, or Mo.js, if you've seen it on. And what it does instead is it requires you in your little tween function to take in the value, the delta, and actually do this stuff inside your own function. So there were times when I needed just to be able to, you know, run things outside of this loop, so I kind of added in that little feature. So it's like it's up to you and your little function to deal with like autonomy, I guess, like a particle. It handles itself. Yeah, so there you go. You just sort of have to set off to the queues. Same thing, really. That's kind of like I kind of like to think of it as like a site engine. It runs everything. So it handles, you know, you've got your debounce resize events, you've got your scroll events, you can handle like animations. I've got sort of rudimentary timelining, but I'm not sure how far I kind of got with that. So timelining, in order to try and queue different tweens, I'm not sure how far I got with this. Effectively, I was looking at the Greensock before I realised this. All that happens really is you create your timeline, and then you add, so you create a tween, put it on the timeline, and then you get sort of the position on that timeline. And all it really does is just queue up these tweens, and then the queue itself is run in the core, and then it sort of, when it gets to the next time, it then fires off the next tween, as it were. So it's just this queuing of tweens, in really simplistic fashion. They're like the two things you kind of need in order to start an animation engine, really. So a way to move things around your screen, maybe a way to timeline, so you can set orders of things, and that's sort of that core loop, I guess. And the whole lot comes in, geez, at about 4K or less, depending on what you use. So yeah, so that's kind of like my reasoning for doing it. A lot of the ones you find online are quite bloated, at least 30K gzips, and then usually you maybe plug out two here and there. So I thought, is there not a way to just do a simpler one and sort of learn from it? However, when it doesn't work and it is a little buggy, you can fall back on the big guns, which are... So this one's one of the biggest, as you can see there. The kind of stuff it can do very easily and very well. Have any of you have played around with the Greenstock library? Yeah. It's very clever. He's done a lot of work around seeing where the performance problems lie with CSS and the main threads and stuff like that. So it's a good one to go to, particularly if you want, lots. It can be quite chunky though. You might not want that full library on it, which is why I went to writing my own. If you want to play around with SVGs, Snap SVGs kind of got you covered. And it's got like everything you need in there. Look at that go. It closes that and then fills up. Magical. Yes. This one's pretty fancy. This one's a new kid on the block. It's still very much in beta, but this one's the one that's more. You have to do a lot more work up front with it. The library itself is about 70K, and then you still, like, in your code, you're taking the update things and then actually having to do a fair bit of work, which is kind of odd, but you do kind of get this sort of stuff with it. Yeah. So it's, I think, has he got the demo of it somewhere?
Right, for the demos.
There we go.
Yeah.
So you see the code for it though is quite.
It had sound as well, so you think
audio. Yeah. So there's your sort of JavaScript. So for you've got this 70K sort of library, and this is this is how much code is required to do this. Yeah. I don't quite know. We're halfway, don't worry, we can get there. So yeah.
What the hell does the library do?
Don't know, just gives you confidence. But yeah, like I said, it's a new kid on the block, and you do seem to be able to do a few nice things with it. Very good with paths and particles. There was, let's see if I can find actually, Facebook reactions. Someone did it with the Moj.js thing. Let's see if I can sort it quickly. Someone kind of redid them and then added that Moj.js, and so every time like the thumb went up, suddenly little particle explosions appeared everywhere just because he could. But yeah, so you can use that one. That's pretty good. I've got a few others in here. What else is there? Sort of motion. If you want to go more into the sort of 3D world, so you've got your. Probably a few of you know this already. 3ds. Yeah. Yeah. So 3ds will get you covered if you want to do more the rendering side of things. But I think it does Canvas as well, doesn't it? You can if you want to set it for things like Canvas, but or WebGL normally.
Actually, there was an animation library extension, so I think that they've released recently.
The animation API for browsers.
Right, is it just integrated there?
Yeah, so the browsers are now making a concerted effort to, all the stuff they're seeing, like in terms of green sock and motion and things, it made sense that they'd try and then, once they'd seen where the tide was going, try and build a bit more of that in. It's so new, I've just not really had a chance to look at it yet. There's only, a couple of browsers have it. I've just not had a chance to really look at it yet. But, from here and now, you can just start get going on some of this stuff. There's something else I was going to say. That was it. Just a little aside. Let's see. So this is the thing I was playing around with as well. I think with the same engine. Oh yeah. I can't read anything from here.
Is it L for valid TLD?
It's local. It's my. It's our own local. Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, so that little the box at the top. So that's all animation. That was and there's something I was playing around with as well. So this was one of the sites where I was trying to orchestrate the whole loading process so that there was no jank at any point in it. But it actually turns out that if you run JavaScript animations as soon as your page loads, particularly if it's quite big like this, because this has got quite a few images in there, you just will get jank straight away. Your JavaScript one will just chug its way on until everything's loaded in and then go smoothly, whereas your CSS animations will pretty much be smooth as soon as they start, which is quite nice. So if you are kind of worried about getting something nice and quick, fancy as quickly as possible, then animation, because it doesn't even bat an eyelid while the fonts are loading, things like that.
So that's more CSS.
Yeah. And then I guess just let's see if we'll get this up. Yeah. And then this is the site we all expect. This is kind of one of the reasons I went down this path a bit. If any of you've seen this one. Yeah. If you've heard of the Rally Interactive guys. There's a beta site, it's not live yet, but you can see you've got this kind of canvas thing going on in the background, it's just floating away. If you sort of open up the menu, it becomes the menu. It's like, what? Even that kind of, even that motions as well. Everything's kind of, and then you start scrolling down, and you've got the top. And it doesn't stop. It's like the most jankless site you can ever see on just about every browser. So I've been trying to dig into the code of it, and they've done pretty much what I've been working on. That sort of core engine. They've got a very good engine. It even unloads images. These right here, so they can they've got line animation stuff going on. Let's see what else they've got. Yeah, so images will fade in as you get to them, usually. And then they actually unfade a little bit. If you stop for a bit, it's gone idling, and they'll actually remove it so that you've just got less stuff happening on the page. You go back a while. Yeah, it's gone back again. Just so you can speed up. And what they've done is they've actually created a data URI of a 1 by 1 pixel transparent GIF as an image, so that it retains its dimensions and things. With all sorts of crazy stuff in it. So that's kind of pretty much. I've used those. I have used those recently. So that's the kind of stuff you can get to if you start playing out with the tweens and all those sorts of fun things. Although that's a lot harder. I don't think there's not a library for that one.
How did they do that?
The ribbon.
Yeah.
It's canvas, so they're these shapes, and you can create a skeletal kind of structure, so you can connect the ribbons.
Yeah.
Hard work and maths.
There is the bit with the menu now, and it's just what?
It's like smoke and mirrors a bit, because the menu is like CSS. It's just the way that it makes it morph and then disappear behind it.
So is the ribbon one giant canvas that covers the whole screen?
Yes, yes it is. And that's running super smoothly at 60 frames a second.
How does it respond to browser results?
Very well, actually. So if you let go, they've got the, they don't actually need to do anything like that yet. And then as you keep shifting down, you do the text shifts, and then you get a mini room.
And it works in other browsers too.
Oh yeah. I don't know what other browsers are.
Troll.
Any questions, I guess? Yes, man in the front.
So you showed us what you can do with CSS, and then you hit the limits. You go into JavaScript. When you see in JavaScript, you start getting to micro optimizations and making sure it's smooth. This sounds like what Houdini is supposed to give us. Have you been looking at Houdini?
Yes, so there's a new, well, I've not looked into it, but there's now a new spec. I don't say it's coming, it's being toyed with, which give you loads of control of as to how the browser actually sort of renders stuff on the page. It gives you access to the compositing layer, and then allows you to like kind of take over a lot of the things and like do it your way if you're trying to do extra things. That's about all I know at the moment. So I glanced at it and thought, this isn't coming for years, so I'm just going to step back for a second.
Basically, web components, but for CSS.
Yeah.
And we give you the power now to render.
Well, that'd be great, because you see what people do already.
Yeah.
Scroll jacking. Yes.
So, why aren't you using Shumway?
Sorry, what?
Why aren't you using Shumway?
Shumway?
Shumway, yeah. It's a Flash, it's a Swift player in
JavaScript.
Stop trolling each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll take it back a couple of levels. So just thinking about like a kind of a more simple problem of, so I had like a circle with kind of like some just translucent background. So really a square, but just a circle. And then trying to do like another shadow behind it. So like two elements at the same time on load. What are some kind of ideas of how to like synchronize their animations together? Because it would kind of be like, so like the button was kind of coming bigger and the shadow was supposed to get bigger behind it, but they would always kind of go at different speeds. Or would you probably jump into JavaScript to kind of try and time them together to like play?
I would usually start by looking at how I could, get the effect in CSS. I do still see, JavaScript's really good at getting that kind of level of control, but you immediately drop like another 30k into your site just to do little things like that. So I will try for those small things to use CSS. And stuff like that, I will try and just tweak and just play around with it and see if I can get the timings right. And you set delays or things like that, or use animation to just kind of play around with the keyframes a bit. I'll start there first, and then if that's fruitless, then
Is there any benefit from setting a delay on both? And then because if it's on page load, it's kind of doing other stuff at the same time.
Yeah, if you want to wait for the page to load, that's one of the areas that CSS falls down, is that you can't detect when the page is loaded. You've just got to set the delay for 2 seconds, and then if your page load in 1, you've got to wait a second for stuff to happen, or if it's taking longer, suddenly it's happening and stuff hasn't appeared, then you might need just that little bit of JavaScript to just wait on page load and then set a class. Probably.
I wanted to ask your opinion on with something like Optimus, where you can like run stuff on the onboard graphics or like by the graphics card you're running. Is it an Intel thing? Where you can switch between the two, so you can like launch a program with using the graphics card process.
Is this outside of browsers?
Yeah, so you can like launch Chrome with the NVIDIA processors or okay. But I just thought there's a problem because sometimes when I would essentially run Chrome inside the process of the graphics card, it would glitch out and it didn't like it, and there was something Google had done inside Chrome to stop you running it specifically.
You answered your own question with that?
But no, they've done this. I just wonder if you heard of it and what your opinion was on that. But I guess if you're just running everything through the graphics card anyway, it wouldn't be an issue.
No, I mean, you obviously can't depend on your user base doing those sorts of tricks. You have to try and use whatever CSS gives you, which is accelerated, and go from there.
Yeah.
You can slow down your animation, so if it's running at 60 frames a second normally, you probably don't always need it at 60 frames a second. I mean, it looks nice, but if it's quite small, you could just get it running at sort of 30. But I did do that on So I just got a little teeny canvas sort of particle thing, and that's actually running about 30 frames a second instead. So it's still using request animation frame, but I've just dropped it down because there's no need. It's so small on phones, it meant it wasn't just doing more than it needed to. Because it actually turns out that even sort of this, so it's moving that like quite slowly. There's one over there moving a bit, and then that. In about probably a minute, my fan's going to start going a bit mental because CSS animations still aren't that performant sometimes. So it's quite good to then, moving to JavaScript, just to slow things down, actually like prevent this from going crazy. So.
Two questions. Firstly, can we see the picture of younger Jeremy again? The story.
Scroll down. No, that's good. 1850.
And the second question is, going right back to the start of your talk with a little joke about Flash. Did you? That's a bloody great start. Do you think we're ever going to see something like a Flash IDE, like the?
Oh. Yes. What's it called? Put it in actually. Yeah. We'll be bookmarking all this stuff around animation. Most of this talk now, so no, I don't make it in as usual. So this is coming along. It's request only at the moment, so I can't play with it or anything. But so yeah, stuff's happening. In fact, as soon as you had transition and animation, people were trying to do this. Andy Clark and a couple other people, he found a developer, and they were all trying to create this thing, and it just sort of disappeared slowly. I guess because they probably reached the conclusion that it was just really slow. They were trying to do, all that stuff around just JavaScript setting CSS transitions and animations. I'm guessing something didn't quite work, and it's kind of got put aside. So there's been a few different things to try and get there. This looks like the most promising at the moment. And of course you've got the Adobe Animate, which is Flash but with a different name. Just exports straight to JavaScript now. So Adobe will come along with some kind of thing, guaranteed.
We're still with it, guys.
So yeah, they're coming. People seem to be making very specific tools. There's also another one called Easy, which I got into. I don't know if anyone's seen that one. Yeah, so it's a little more specific. It does actually allow you more stuff. It's more for the designers, I think, because you can drag in Photoshop files and it will split up your layers, and you can. In fact, it requires you to use Photoshop, from what I've heard. So it's got your different objects to then move around. I mean, you can just set your delays and things and so a bit of
And Sketch. Good.
Oh, the Sketch now.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've got access to this one over early access, but I haven't found much use to use it yet. And you very quickly need to start paying for it. But it isn't much. It's like $10 a month. So there's a few tools out there if you look.
I don't have a question, but a little bit of an announcement. If you're into web animation stuff, a friend of mine, Rachel Neighbours, based in the States, and she does a lot of stuff in web animation. She's going to be in the country this month, and she's going to come to Brighton. So she'll be speaking at Ladies to UX on March 22nd. That'll be quite a quick talk. But she will be sticking around, so on March 23rd we'll talk about maybe having some kind of meetup or something, some kind of, I don't know, in the pub or here or something, just geek out about the state of web animations.
She's been the one writing all the animation API that's going to browsers. She's been doing all the documenting, so she knows quite a lot about what's going on there. And what's it called now? What was that? Firefox's
Showcase.
Diamond. Yeah, do you know what it's called? I don't know really.
Firefox is what, sorry?
There was like a demo site, like USAD animation demo.
It was for their browser, that's the developers' browser.
Developer edition.
Yeah, so
bid that as well.
She's not around like till the end of March, is she? Like the 31st.
No, I think she hit the country on 29.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Big round of applause.